anything in particular that had you transition into that space from a more technical role?
Um, Oh, I think I was kind of a bit vocal on the teams anyway about things and how I
Okay.
thought things could be better. So I think, it started off with people saying, "Okay, you run it then," that sort of sort of situation. Um, but then when I went to a bigger consultancy, my intention was to stay technical and do more engineering roles, but I could just kept getting put into the other types of roles, and then I gradually got more and more off the tools, as it were, and yeah, I just shifted towards helping people more, which I enjoy just as much as the tech anyway. So I can't complain about it too much, although I did complain at the time. I wanted to stay technical.
As a technical person myself too, I can appreciate, enjoying kind of just focusing on the technology but yeah, you got the people saw the talent in you and asked you to help and you've stepped up. So, the reason we have you, Robin, in today, everyone, is because we wanted to talk about coming from chaos to clarity, right? And what that means because most people, most entrepreneurs, most small businesses that are running their operation, they're jumping from one fire to the other fire, one emergency to the other. And so, how does a company move from being a small, unstructured organization to one that has systems, plans, organization, teams, and processes in place? And so, Robin is probably the ideal person, in my opinion, to give us insights and steps, shares experience with what we can do to be able to do something like that effectively. So the whole idea is chaos costs money. Chaos costs businesses their productivity, costs them financially in terms not just operations, but in terms of marketing, sales, when things aren't together. So we're looking to Robin to kind of share his experiences about how did he uh, not only come to do what he does, but also ideas and strategies that he uses to help organizations improve their operation and their productivity. So um, my first question to you would be, why do owners normalize chaos? Why does it become such a regular occurrence? Or what is your understanding of why so many small businesses, granted, I don't have the statistics before me at this moment, but we know many small businesses fall out of operation, and many of us have heard the statistics. Most businesses go out within the first 5 years. So, any reason or any suggestions as to why, what chaos and disorder may have a role in that capacity?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's only small businesses. So I think,
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen plenty
Okay.
of kind of
Uh-huh.
chaotic situations in big
Uh-huh.
businesses and in, departments in big businesses as well. And I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's something that just creeps up on people. I think, especially when you're small, things are by necessity, really, yeah, a bit chaotic. If there's not many people, there's lots of
Hmm.
wearing multiple hats, hopping about from one task to another.
Yes.
And that feels normal. It's kind of, it's a hustle and, you've just got to get through the day.
Yeah.
Um, and that might be sustainable if it's a small team or just, a person working on their own. But when you scale, sometimes some anti-patterns have crept in. So the roles aren't clearly defined, or the tools are a bit all over the place. Um, and you'll find there's good stuff and bad stuff about the structure and habits of the business. And you end up scaling all of it, the good and the bad, instead of just scaling the good stuff. So I think there's if everyone's just trying to get through the day anyway, it's hard to sort of necessarily step back and take a pause and try and deliberately design your operating models. In real life, they kind of emerge a lot and just unfold, and that's when things can get messy. And before you know it, it's a bigger problem to solve than it would have been if you solved it when you were smaller.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. So it sounds to me as though businesses small or even large, as you mentioned, they're just kind of going about the day, tackling one activity to the next. So it becomes, you was use the word operating models. And I don't think necessarily many entrepreneurs are reflect on that idea of operation models. I think they're just thinking about, which leads to my next question about hustle.
Hmm.
Most companies are our entrepreneurs are looking to just kind of hustle and get through the day. If they were busy, if they had a lot of calls, if they made a lot of sales, they're happy and they're thinking, okay, I've been productive and successful. So there's something to be said for having a model of operation versus just kind of, getting through the day and hustling. Is there anything, how would you suggest that somebody moves from uh, just getting through the day to executing on or thinking about an operating model maybe before executing on it?
Um, I would say you don't necessarily have to kind of go big bang and transform everything. So you can just think about what you're most lacking now and just fix one thing at a time. So I'm often surprised by how many people don't really do any planning. So often
Mhm.
that's the first thing I would say. If you don't do planning, just maybe introduce, start the week with a bit of a planning session. What am I trying to achieve this week? Okay, how does that break down day by day? And just get a bit of structure in there,
Mm,
so you don't have to go full blown from zero to operating model, but
got you.
then you can add, a weekly review or some quarterly goal setting or and you can add bits of the operating model as you go. You haven't got to just go from 0 to 100.
Understood. So it sounds to me as though if you're able to just start with something small, which kind of reminds me of the book Atomic Habits, which talks about just incremental
Mm,
habits and things like that, that as you build, you can expand or improve over time. So that makes absolute sense. It's not trying to like build Rome in a day, so to speak. You want to do
exactly.
one
Yeah.
section, do what you can comfortably and progress. So for the entrepreneur that's thinking about, hey, how do I revamp my organization or how do I get it from a place of chaos to order? The first place to start, it sounds like, is just maybe having some priorities for each week or each day on a regular basis.
Um, Often, I mean, it's very context specific. So for some people, that might not be the problem. But I'd say I start with the biggest problem.
Mm,
What's your biggest pain point right now?
mhm.
And kind of operationalize the solution to that, or a way to mitigate that. And then once you've addressed that and that's better, what's the next biggest thing? And just work through systematically. Don't try to boil the ocean, and just get it all done in one go.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That makes sense. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the impact of disorganization, disorder, or chaos that it can have on a company? It may be some stories that are safe to share, or maybe just kind of make it a little bit generalized for us here.
I'll probably just generalize a bit if that's like
All right. Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
and
Okay.
mention no names.
All right.
But I think the most common pattern I see is um, people trying to do too much. They're trying to do everything at once. So, and this applies on a personal level, an individual level. So, individuals are overwhelming themselves by starting too many tasks at the same time, and then they've got lots of plates spinning, and chaos ensues. Um, quite often, if you've got three things to do, if you do them in sequence, do thing one, then thing two, then thing three, you'll get all three done faster than if you try to do all three at the same time.
So you're not a
Yeah,
big fan of multitasking, I imagine.
yeah. So I mean, some multitasking's
Mm,
what's the word? Unavoidable because you get blocked on
mm,
something, you got to pick something else up and all that. But some people just overwhelm themselves. Lots of people do that. And that happens not just at the individual level, but kind of on a team level too, departmental, even at the board of a business. They've got too many initiatives going on and they can't just cognitively process it. And with so many plates spinning, that just makes everything more complicated. There's more interactions going on. Everybody's more confused. Everyone feels busier. but it slows things down because now you've got all this kind of coordination cost between all these tasks and hopping between different things. So it's much better to limit the work in progress if you can at whatever level. And I say it starts from the top. So, if I
Absolutely.
work with an
Uh-huh.
executive committee,
Yes.
it's the same message to them. It's okay, okay, which things are you not going to do? Strategy is about choices. And if
Mm.
you're setting a strategy, if you just say, we're going to do everything that we think is a good idea, it's not really a strategy. That's just a bit spray and pray, you've got to make hard choices and prioritize at the top level.
Hmm.
And then that should hopefully free up capacity right through the organization. That should percolate. But it's the same message at each level. So what happens really is when people get overwhelmed and they're spinning too many plates, mistakes happen. So now you end up with, drops in quality, lots of rework, which the rework then takes up even more capacity, and and then it becomes a bit of a vicious spiral. But yeah, often the root of lots of different dysfunctions. So say it might be poor quality, or it might be low throughput. It might be demoralized teams or people burnt out. The root often is we're trying to do too much at once. And ironically, the hard message to sell sometimes to people is what I just explained to you about the three tasks in serial is quicker
Hmm.
than doing
Hmm.
three at the same time. But for
Mm.
some reason, we almost universally do this to ourselves, and boards do it to their businesses. It's,
Makes sense.
you know.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You
Mm.
you mentioned a word that I'd like to touch on. You mentioned strategy, and
Mhm.
though I think you touched on the idea of maybe starting incrementally, you did introduce the principle of strategy. How do you think strategy relates to the small business in contrast to the larger companies or organizations that may have more in terms of resources or more tools, more people, more software and systems? How does one incorporate strategy, let's say, from a small business perspective?
So it can be as simple as, deciding what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. I'm going
Mm.
after this type of customer and not that type of customer because my strengths are here, or this one aligns better with my values, or I see opportunities over here, and it's actually setting a direction rather than just doing everything. So,
Okay.
it's being a bit more selective and a bit more deliberate about, okay, yeah, I'm going to pursue this market sector and this type of people, as one thing, or I'm going to leverage this type of technology. So it's basically just understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, the SWOT analysis type things that we've done together, so your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, threats, understanding that landscape, understanding the context that you're operating in, and then understanding, what path you should chart through that. And that will mean not this, as well as being this, it's also not this, and then
Got
being
it.
disciplined about it.
So strategy is not doesn't have to be some complex thing where you have all 20 steps laid out. It's just a strategy could begin with just this is what I want and this is what I don't want. This is what I want to do, this is what I won't do, type of thing.
Yeah, you can start, you don't have to produce a massive strategy document and, have spent months on some big thing. It can, especially, at a small level, it can kind of
Mhm.
unfold and
Mhm.
emerge. Different personality types will want different levels of detail. Some people will want, well, they'll have the next 5 years mapped out or something, and other people are a bit more now to next. And it might well be, depending on the domain you're operating in, if it's a fast changing domain, and now to next strategy might be more appropriate. It might be, if you create a 5 year plan, by the time
Mm.
you get there, the world's changed so much and it was the wrong plan. So you might need to be a bit more incremental. You know, some places review quarterly. So
Mm.
just but you have a cycle and you
Yes.
work through that cycle and you're reevaluating, is this strategy working? Is this what I thought was true? is it actually true? And so your strategy will evolve as you learn because some of your assumptions will prove to be wrong. Others will be right. So it's yeah, kind of finding your way. And especially these days, everything's changing so fast. I'm seeing more people just working in shorter cycles, but there still are cycles and there still are objectives and things to target and tracking of progress and you know assessing how you've done.
It's a great point. Yes. Uh, Strategy again can start small and grow larger. From what you're saying, it's also something that um, it may depend or vary depend based on the type of environment or the nature of the organization. And so don't have to make it a complex thing. You can make it, doesn't have to be a 10-page document per se. It could just be, how are we doing? I think you mentioned now to next. So your strategy could be now to next, I guess, and
Can
that be
be
what.
it can be very lightweight. You know, if you're very small and there's only a couple of employees, it can be overkill to go and do a big, you know,
Got it.
um, uh, that's the thing. I mean, it's good to know what you're going to do and to have a strategy. You'd be
Yes.
surprised how many people don't really have a strategy and they're just
Yeah.
chasing business and just getting
Yeah.
going from day to day.
Yes.
So, you know, it's good to be
Intentional, maybe.
looking, you know, a year out or a quarter out or whatever.
Yeah.
And that might help decision making easier because
Mm.
now you know where you're going. So as decisions crop up, the question is a bit simpler. Well, does this get me in the direction I want to go or not? No, okay, I'm not doing it. Right. So, you know, it helps with prioritization and stuff like that if you've got this kind of North Star that you're heading
Headed
to.
forward. Love it. Thank you. And so, as you talked about complexity and variety, and you mentioned, especially with shorter cycles, some organizations, some have larger cycles, think in terms of years, decades, or even for them, their shorter periods is are quarters. For some companies, day to day, especially for the small business, um, a lot of it has to do with how does a company kind of get through the day, through the week, as you mentioned before. Things like email overload and miscommunication. How do you suggest teams and organizations address that, especially when you've got now AI, you've got Google search, you have phone calls, you've got text messages, you've got chats, you've got so many different ways to communicate and potentially communications coming in simultaneously. Um, is there a suggestion or some kind of approach that you would recommend?
At a personal level, for me, I used to just time box those type of activities. So I'd make sure I would protect my focus blocks. You know, I
Mm,
do knowledge work, so I'm sitting at a desk. So you know, it depends on. I guess if you're a landscaper, you've got different, you know, sort of. Yeah. So I strictly time box those activities. I won't look at the messages, you know, apart from in certain blocks. Um, I say until recently, but then, you know, now we have new tools and stuff like that and AI assistants and things like that. So I've
mm,
started experimenting with that more lately.
okay.
And yeah, I'm kind of blown away now. My inbox is at zero every morning and it's just got actionable things in it and that's all automated now. So yeah, I have a quick look. It's not a I for me with automation, especially the AI automation that can understand the content of the email and make a decision based on that. I mean, once you've
Mm,
tested it and you trust it, um, for me, that problem goes away. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, as a general principle, though, I guard my focus blocks. I make sure I have, you know, if I know what I want to achieve this week, part of my
mm,
planning for the week is, okay, when am I going to do that? It's not just, I'm going to do this by the end of the week. It's like, I'm doing this by the end of the week and I'm going to achieve that in two focus blocks, one on Tuesday morning and one on Wednesday morning. Right. Those are the blocks for that. And this, you know, so I've almost got like a school timetable. if you like. I've got double maths in Monday morning, and then so for mine is planning Monday morning. Then this, and it's I kind of map out my week, and I've got steady focus blocks that I protect, and I won't, or I try not to book any meetings during those times. I kind of got the freedom to do that, but I can flex as well. If I'm with a client and they can only meet at a certain time, I'll move my focus block and then I'll meet them. But
Mm,
I just make
mm,
sure I get the focus blocks
mm.
for
So
the
what I'm
team.
hearing is that there's times that you block off in advance to where maybe you cut off all communication. So you've already prioritized those things that are most important and set
Yeah.
those things as the things you need to accomplish.
Yes. So yeah, it's probably because of my background and I work with OKRs and I was a Scrum Master. So I'm very goal oriented. So I will have like a year-long goal, things that I want to achieve this, and that's broken down into smaller goals. So this quarter I want to achieve these things. Then that naturally informs the kind of weekly planning. It's like, what do I need to achieve this week in order to achieve for the quarter? So, that's my way of keeping focused on the making sure my activity is aligned with my longer term goals.
That sounds
So,
good. Sounds good. In terms of bottlenecks and human bottlenecks, and then like say disconnected tools and things like that, how much do you see that maybe in the larger companies and the smaller companies, bottlenecks? And then how do you suggest those things be addressed?
bottlenecks. Okay, so that can be all sorts of flavors of bottlenecks. So at the smaller company, in a more sort of entrepreneurial kind of level, often the sorry to say, Adrian, but often the
Mm,
founder becomes a bottleneck. That is a bit because they've got so much that only they know, and and people rely on them, and so and the decisions tend to go through them until they have, established their kind of circle of trust or built up that, people have earned that, the trust and stuff. So that's one class of bottleneck where literally other people's activities are waiting on a decision from the founder, and the founder's overwhelmed just getting through the day and doing loads of other stuff, and they're half the time not even aware, or can't keep it all in their mind how many people are waiting on what.
mm,
So so that's uh one class of but which might you might address through more delegation, or it might just be a matter of, okay, well, we need to look at our processes, think about our decision making kind of framework, as it were, who's allowed to make what decisions and actually plan that out and get deliberate about that. Um, in bigger kind of corporate settings, it can be that a team is a bottleneck for a team of teams. If so in software typically, which is mostly my background, you might have. So one place I was working at had loads of development teams, about 20 development teams, and a deployment team,
mm,
and none of the development teams had access to the live production servers. Everything had to go through the deployment team. And you were ending up with, in that place, it's a big outfit. They had a 6 month queue for deployment. So
mm,
you can imagine is a massive bottleneck because no one can get anything out the door. They can make the changes, they can't get it deployed into production. Um, so yeah, it's a completely different type of bottleneck, which is a symptom of the organizational design. So
mm,
what we did in that case was we we moved deployment skills into one team. We picked a team and then said, okay, let's move someone from the deployment team into that team and give them the authority to deploy to production on themselves. So we'll experiment with moving that capability out away from the one team into the other teams, but we just started with one team. And so it's just a case of moving one person. and they had all the logins and the access. Suddenly, now that team can make a change, get stuff out the door, make a change out the door, and the work started flowing again. So then that proved the case to then start doing that for other teams and gradually migrating away from having one specialist team there to spreading that capability across all the teams. And then you've unblocked a bottleneck there.
Got it, got it, got it.
So,
And then um, you mentioned creating groups or teams of teams, and I'm sure each solution to each challenge may be unique or different depending on the company, the goals, the processes, the systems. But a word that you mentioned experiment, and
mm,
I think about like say smaller businesses. Again, part of what my background is in small business, so a lot of times with constrained resources and limited amount of time for the team or even for the founders or the leadership group, it becomes a challenge, at least from my perspective, to be able to balance all of those things. So I'm
mhm.
wondering, how is it just a matter of um, how would you suggest a team go about experimenting changes or analyzing the situation? Or is this just a time when we need to bring in somebody like yourself that's a consultant that's kind of experienced and has the knowledge and the background to say, okay, you need this, you need that, after having a conversation, doing some kind of diagnosis like a doctor, how would you approach a situation like that?
So if I've been engaged as as a consultant to help address something,
Mm,
it can be tempting to think the answer straight away, and to go, yes, they've got the bottleneck over here, or this is and quite often what's true in one place isn't true somewhere else. The things are so complex that even situations that look the same, you could try it in one place and it works, and you try it somewhere else and it doesn't. So, so really, I'm very cautious about saying do this and it will work and this will solve your problem. So for me, most change that I propose is an experiment in terms of my hypothesis is that if you do this, this will
mhm,
improve. But let's
mhm,
just try it on a small scale first. Let's try to limit kind of blast radius, if you like, and do this. That if it works, then we'll expand it. If it doesn't, we'll kill it. Try something else. So um, I prefer that way because I don't think you can know in advance. Really, companies are so different, and people are different. Humans are messy. You got different personalities, interpersonal reactions, relationships, politics. There's so many moving parts to it that you can't really just assume anyway. Yeah, so experiment for me is basically any change that you make. You want to do it cautiously and monitor it, make sure it works first, and then you can call it, okay, good, that does work here. Let's do more of that. So like that experiment, like the one I mentioned before with moving the DevOps capability into the teams.
mhm.
Once
Got
we
it.
proved it, and it was self-evident, because the other thing it helps to overcome is fear of change, because that's another, if you come in wanting to change everything, it rubs people up the wrong way. People don't like it. Understandably, it might be a threat to their job or to how they do their job or their domain, their sphere of influence or whatever. So, there's all sorts of reasons why people kind of can be resistant to change, um, but they're less resistant to small scale experiments.
Mm.
And then if they work, and the business case is clear, it's like, look, we do this, it solves this problem, then the resistance is kind of neutralized.
Understood, understood. That was exactly what I was going to step into next, which is scenarios, use cases, and stakeholder buy-in. How do you roll out a solution? How do you roll out a project? How do you roll out a change to an organization in such a way that you have buy-in from those who are going to be implementing these changes?
So one of them was what I just mentioned about, small, keep it small, start simple. Um, the other thing is just don't come wading in, saying I've got all the answers. You involve people in the change, so you co-create the intervention, whatever it is that you're going to do. You don't do it come sort of along, on your white horse as a consultant saying, right, we're all going to do this, so you work with people. I think is a main thing. I think if people are involved, and you've got these sort of change for frameworks like the Cotter's 8 steps, or ADKAR and things like that, which are a kind of method, where you establish a guiding coalition and you create a sense of urgency, and you follow a set of steps roughly in a not necessarily strict sequence. So it's just general principles are in for me anyway. I just like to start small and co-create things, and
Mhm.
nothing we're doing is set in stone until we've proved that it works first. So everything starts with a small experiment. So everything is a hypothesis in the beginning that we're trying to prove.
Mhm. Got it. A scenario came to mind, as you mentioned, larger organizations, and maybe say a certain team is implementing or is your test ground, test bed for this proposed change. But let's say there are other teams who are doing similar processes or working on the same kind of roles or functions.
Mhm.
Um, are there things like surveys, or do you just present results to them? What do you do to inform the buy-in, so to speak, as well, further than just kind of maybe prototyping it with a few people and a team, and then having that roll out throughout the entire organization? Should it be systemic? And any
Um,
thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, so that's been I've had lots of situations where you go in and there's lots of teams and not many people want to do any change. You're not very welcome. They don't want you there. Their bosses brought you in and they don't want you there at all. So in those cases, I will seek out the least resistant teams and work with those first, and generate some like sort of social proof, you know, it's show some benefits for the sort of things that they're doing. So it's like, oh, then everyone can see, oh, that team started doing this, and now the boss is praising them and their work's flowing through faster, and and so on. So you can end up then generating pull instead of push. If you're going around telling people, right, your boss says you need to change, I've got to fix you as a team, and that doesn't land very well. It's much better if you can generate some pull, and the pull comes from showing some results somewhere. So start small with a non-resistant team, get some wins, um, and then you will find other people go, can you show us how to do this, or can you help us introduce this new practice, and so on. So yeah, slowly, slowly, slowly. Don't try and force anything in anywhere, because that's just counterproductive. It would just slow everything down, and people will hate you, and you won't get anywhere.
Makes sense, makes sense. So you kind of just have to, I don't know, just kind of assimilate or kind of gradually
Well,
stir the. Mhm.
but also, if it's not telling people what their problem is,
Mm,
asking them what's your biggest pain point and helping them with that. That really buys people in. If I come along and say, this is your problem and da 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 da, so we need to change this, it just doesn't help. It doesn't, so if it's better if the conversation is more like, okay, what's your biggest pain point right now? How can
mhm,
we address this, and work with them to address that? Because then they are bought into solving something they perceive to be a real problem, and not just something they're told by a consultant is a problem.
makes sense, makes sense. And as you said, change, right? And
Mhm.
you said from smaller to larger. One of the things that comes up to mind is numbers, right? Many businesses in order to implement some form of change, they need some proof, as you mentioned. For companies that have numbers, that might be easy. For companies that don't have numbers, they don't even know necessarily where they may have a feeling of some of the key bottlenecks, but they probably have limited visibility into the systemic bottlenecks, so to speak, or
Mhm.
the other things that may be impacting uh, accomplishing those goals. So can you talk a little bit about how numbers come into play? How does one incorporate measures into an organization? And then particularly for the organization that has no numbers, so to speak, no KPIs, no OKRs. They're just kind of, they've been winging it, so to speak.
Um, so I suppose in those sort of situations, what you're looking for is uh, s- for whatever the problem is that is perceived. So there's a an issue. Okay, so how do you know that's an issue? What happens that's there? What would be better if that issue was fixed? Or would we see fewer of these things or more of this or whatever, and start to sort of try and drive towards what things you want to see more of and less of and count that. So it's like just very simple, basic, right? We're getting too many of this type of mistake happening. Okay, how many happened last month and the month before? Right, let's gather some data here to quantify the problem. And it's good to do that before you actually make any changes, especially as a consultant, because at the end of the engagement, people can say, "Well, what have you achieved?" And if you don't have any numbers, that can be a bit uncomfortable. So, a consultant will want to baseline the problem or the impact of the problem that they're dealing with, and it's good practice anyway for any business. It's like, well, okay, well, what am I? I want to see fewer of these mistakes. I want to see more of these. So it's a context specific around the problem. Count the thing, measure the thing in some way, and then measure it before, during, and after the change. And it's as simple as that, and just build up gradually. You don't have to have a whole suite of KPIs. Sometimes you can see kind of numbers for numbers' sake, and people end up swamped in numbers. There's a whole cottage industry of gathering metrics and data and everything, and
Mhm.
people just look at it on a dashboard and don't do anything with the information. So I I say, just as the need for a number becomes apparent, add it. And that's it. So when you're doing OKRs, the need is then, okay, we're trying to move this. We're trying to, improve our, operational efficiency. Okay. So what will that look like? Uh, you know, um, oh, this thing will get faster. Oh, how much faster? Right. Okay. How fast is it now? If they don't know, then it's not really a good measure. If they can't find out, if there's something someone can't measure, it's not a good key result. It's not a good thing to track. So you just keep questioning people and drill in until you find something that, okay, this measure is a good measure for that thing, or it might be a proxy for the thing. Um, there's a whole world around measurement because, even just measuring things can change them.
Mm.
So,
In terms
then there's a can of worms there.
mm. In terms of common issues, maybe it's not the same exact problem, but is there a class of issue or possibly a common type of error, gap, failure that you see inside organizations that are the most typical pitfalls, so to speak, or most common things? I know you mentioned earlier in the conversation about maybe trying to do too much at the same time without prioritization. Are
Hmm.
there any other common issues that you see?
Yeah, I mean, they're usually in sort of kind of three kind of categories, if you like. It's usually something to either do with time, cost, or quality. Yeah. So, yeah, something's costing too much, or there's too much waste. Um, there are too many returns. There's too much rework. Yeah. So it's usually about, we can't do this thing fast enough, or,
Mm,
so it's about throughput and lead times and that type of metric. Um, Cost is obvious. It's just we're spending too much money on this for what we get. And yeah, quality can just be, error rates, defects in software terms. It's how many bugs are coming through, how many critical incidents are happening in production, and all that sort of stuff. Is that the sort of thing you were asking? Did I answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, in terms of kind of transitioning from that into kind of the similar question, but numbers having a role to play in terms of the common issues and how to bring clarity. So let's say um, we talk again. The title of this conversation is about coming from chaos to clarity, and so there's
Mhm.
common issues. You've shared maybe that there's certain types of classes
That's
or
it.
groups of issues that
Mhm.
organizations deal with. Um, can you tell me what type of role or impact numbers have in terms of bringing clarity, and what areas do you find are the best areas to put numbers around, or the most common areas that organizations can put metrics around to see where they are? Obviously, like you said, it has a lot to do with the goals, but are there areas where by default you would say numbers should be in this space, numbers should be in that space, numbers should be over there as well?
Um, I guess for me, the most familiar terrain is probably in the software world, which I don't know how well that sort of translates to the people on the call, but the most universal type one, I guess, sort of useful number from my perspective is I do tend to want to know in a sort of context of chaos, um, is work in progress. How many initiatives have you got running at the same time? Um, I want that number to shift downwards because for me, reducing that is what is often the root cause of some of the time issues or the cost issues or the quality issues. So scaling back the amount of work in progress is a kind of universal proxy for lots of problems, and that can make the headspace then to think about the problem properly and make proper changes. So, and it's emotionally difficult because it means pausing some work, and people then feel like that's a delay. Um, but and so it's kind of counterintuitive because you're pausing it so that you can get it done faster. It's like a lumberjack has to stop to sharpen his saw. Yeah, it's that principle. Yes, you can carry on struggling along with the same dysfunctions you have now and refuse to stop, and you can't stop any of this, but over time you'll get more done if you kind of pause. So yeah, I'm big on the work in progress number, as in I can't really generalize that across different types of business because it depends how many teams you've got and how many people you've got. So it would be looking at that and assessing that in the context for that business. Um, that applies in software teams as well. How many features are you trying to build right now? And, they've got loads. It's like, right, stop those ones, just do this one. Oh, we got it finished. Oh, no, we can do another one. And then suddenly trying to drive that more serial behavior. Um, in the Kanban world, they've got a phrase. It's uh, s- stop starting, start finishing. Yeah, that's the phrase around this work in progress number. It's like,
Mm,
if you let that work in progress build up too much, it's going to
mhm.
slow everything down. So you need to get that smaller to get a good flow of work through. So that's a core one that I can think of as more as universal. Lead times, that applies in lots of businesses. How long has it taken from when the customer asks for something to when they've got it? That's a good end-to-end metric that can indicate better health. It might mean it could be that your quality's improved and there's less rework, so things are going through faster. So it's a good proxy for lots of things, the lead time.
Lead time.
Um,
It's a great one. That's
yeah.
a great one.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a few sort of like lead time, failure rates, sort of high level metrics that you can't do well. You can't get good numbers on unless you're doing some good practices below and other, getting smaller things done. What's a good way to explain that? Dora. Have you heard of Dora? Dora
Not familiar.
metrics.
Not
It's a
familiar.
it's some DevOps research. Um, can't remember what the A is now, but it's a project. It's owned by Google now, and that measures the effectiveness of software teams. And they started, looking at whole suites of metrics, and they ended up just boiling it down to four. They were like, these four are good proxies for all of these others because you can't get good numbers on these four without
Mhm.
the others all being in a healthy place.
I see.
So those were around lead times, change failure rates. Let's see if I can't remember all four off the top of my head right now, but it's
Mhm.
yeah. So it's just a little. There's a few things like that that are good proxies for everything else. So when in doubt, look at those. But ultimately, it's just very context specific. It'll be different in your business to mine and to, you know, Citibanks or Rolls Royces or whatever.
It's kind of like each organization is unique, almost. I guess there's different human beings involved and different locations, different resources, different time of the year. There's just so many
Mhm.
variable variables to deal with any project, I imagine, as a consultant. So, for you, would you, when you're approaching things from maybe like a systems perspective, a time management perspective, a personnel perspective, how do you, or leadership perspective, how do you bring those things together? Um, are there ever times when you have to have the hard conversation, or are there ever times when you it's kind of say you're doomed to fail, or pretty much is there always a way out, so to speak?
Um, a surprising number of hard conversations.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, there can be um, yeah, often if you get hired by someone who is has got an idea of what the problem is that they want to fix. So a typical case, say in my industry, in IT, would be a senior leader of a IT department says, "Can come in and fix my teams. My teams are, yeah, they're rubbish. They're just a bunch of plodders. They can't
Ouch.
estimate properly. They can't deliver on time. They make too many mistakes. And it's
Mhm.
the team. And then, the hard conversation can be, well, I've been here and, it's not the teams, or it's the system. Generally, it's not the managers either. So you have a situation where the managers are blaming the teams are blaming the managers, um, and it's neither. It's the system of work. It's how it might be structural. It might be that the teams are the wrong shape and have got the wrong skills in them, like the one I mentioned about they lacked DevOps skills and authorization to go to production. So it might be. So if you're looking at the operating model, there's you've got the different lenses to it. So you've got people, processes, and tools. So
Mhm.
you would look across all of it, but yeah, it can be a difficult conversation when someone hires you for one thing and it's like, fix my teams. And the answer is like, it's not the teams. It doesn't matter what I do with the team, that'll be
Mhm.
tinkering around the edges. The real problem is this systemic thing. And they sometimes they don't want to hear that. And it might
Mm,
require some changes with the leadership behaviors as well, which they might not have an appetite for too. So yeah, there can be all sorts of difficult conversations. They tend to be more at the senior level. The teams are usually easier to work with than
mm. Makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah.
Makes sense. So let's talk about how that translates. Oh, I think we have Dora here. DevOps research and assessment. And I guess it's a research team that was acquired by Google Cloud. It's a program that studies high-performing technology teams to understand what makes them successful, providing data-driven insights to improve software development and delivery. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So they talk a lot about, different metrics. There's a whole book. I think the book's called Accelerate,
mm,
that explains and tells the whole story of how Dora came about and how they boiled it down to these four metrics. So it's a good book if you're interested in metrics. It's a bit of a
okay.
niche thing.
It's great. All right. All right. Now let's get into the nitty gritty, Robin. Let's talk about money, the moolah, the thing that makes everything go around, right?
Right. Okay.
All of this talk about chaos and disorder and everything like that. At the bottom, it all comes down to money to a large degree, right?
Mhm.
Um, what are some of the biggest bottlenecks in terms of success and in terms of a company accomplishing its goal and meeting its targets in terms of revenue and profitability? And yeah, how often do you see that? Is that the core issue? Is that commonly the main thing? Revenue, right? Like, how does clarity impact the success of a business financially?
So I mean, I guess if you're talking about just smooth operations, if you like, is not automatically going to bring you more customers. You still have to do the marketing, and there has to be a market, and you know, um, so when it comes down to its influence on revenue, it's more around your reputation, I suppose, that you get things done, you're reliable, things happen quickly without mistakes. So it's kind of there's a reputational side to it in terms of actual revenue. If you're talking then about margin, then that so efficiency is going to give you better margins. It's going to cost you less to do the same things, and if you're making fewer mistakes, you're having to do things once instead of two times or three times or whatever. So there's the reputational side, just how you look. You'll have happier customers if you reliably deliver on time or quickly or ahead of time, or but you're there. But also then you'll have better margins if you don't have lots of waste in your system.
That's great. That's great. So clarity around numbers can give you ideas around potential wastes or inefficiencies or areas where we can trim the fat, so to speak.
Yeah, so when we mentioned before about the work in progress. So, if you're manufacturing, if you've got a factory, um, inventory is waste.
Mm,
You don't want loads of unfinished work, unfinished things cluttering up the factory and everything. And you can see it's visible if you've got lots of stuff, lots of work in progress. With knowledge work, it's a bit it's less visible, it's invisible, but it's the same concept. Half finished things, unfinished work is waste. But it's all cognitive load. It's all things you've got to think about. So this
mm.
is why another reason why we talk about work in progress, and we try to limit work in progress. It's to minimize the amount of unfinished work in the system. It's like kind of cognitive inventory. I have to keep looking at this big list of things all the time just to do this thing, and that's where that overwhelm, too many plates spinning comes from. It's waste. There's
Mm.
stuff in there, too much in the system.
Wow. So waste, yeah, waste in the system, gaps in terms of things that aren't being taken care of, or things that are too much that's being tried to take care of, a work in progress is what can really hamper a team. Can you talk a little bit more about operational clarity, maybe in terms of workflows, ownership and roles, systems and tools, and OKRs? What are the how do you combine those things to bring a cohesive or comprehensive solution that supports growth? Um, Basically, you shared about marketing and sales are still relevant and still necessary. So what we're doing here is just creating a space or a system that allows for the pipeline and the machine to run efficiently, effectively at maximum capacity, or maybe not maximum capacity, but orderly,
Mhm.
thereby improving effectiveness. So how do workflows, ownerships and roles, systems and tools, and the metrics all come together in like one big piece to solve a business problem? How do you incorporate all of these things into one custom solution?
Um, well, it's the whole package of people, process, and tools. So when we think around that, when we talk about people, it's understanding the roles and responsibilities, having those all clearly defined and understood by everyone. People will understand who owns what, who can decide what, who's responsible for these things. So you got that side. It should all be documented and agreed. Sometimes that's just implicit knowledge and it's just assumed that everybody knows it, but get it all down. The same with the processes then. So defining what is our process for this? Have we written it down? Really, does it, can we communicate this? What happens when we're onboarding a new person? Have we got a, is it take ages to explain this thing now? It's much better if you've got, a standard operating procedure for things. This is how we do stuff, and we've mapped it out and we've drawn a flow chart of it and stuff like that. So that's the sort of thing that I would be trying to if you're asking about the deliverables in terms of for improving the operations. So there are the things you do and the experiments you do to see what works and what doesn't, and to let things unfold or kind of emerge or evolve, what the operating model should be. The deliverables to make that land and stick, especially as you scale, so that new people that you onboard know what all of that is to document each of those sort of classes of things, like all the people stuff, roles, responsibilities, decision making, yeah, the tools, what the tools are, what is our, how do they interact, what tools we use, what's allowed, what's not, how do we use them, yeah, all of that. It gets more important as you scale that those things are written down, because you're going to have more people who need to understand it and they all need to have a shared understanding. And if they don't have a shared understanding, you're back to a mess again and everyone doing things their own way.
All right. All right. Well,
So,
thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. Yep. So here we have it. We're talking about clear workflows, clear ownership and roles, clear systems and tools, clear goes through OKRs. Robin, you've been in the industry for quite a long time. You're a veteran in the game, we call it, so to speak. How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, if they want to engage you in consulting, if they need to get a hold of your services? What are the best ways people can reach you?
just well, my website's called outcome-vectors.co.uk. So people can message me there or on LinkedIn. There's I'm just Robin Hyman on LinkedIn with this face. They're probably the most direct routes. I won't give my email out on here.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Robin. Let's just see if there's maybe one or two questions as we wrap up.
Sure.
Are there any questions from the field? Uh, if there are, can somebody paste them in the chat? If not, we will go ahead and just kind of close things out real quick. Okay. So how can leaders improve operational clarity while avoiding unnecessary software spending and experimentation.
Well, operational clarity. For me, the very first thing, it always comes back to, less is more. So just don't try to do too much all at the same time. That
Mm,
will instantly make things clearer. You can start to see the wood for the trees, and um, so often the first thing to do working with a leader is, list out all the stuff and then make some hard decisions about, okay, what am I going to pause here? So you're not killing it, you're not going to lose it, you're not going to, but it's just what do I need to pause and which do I can focus on now. So it's just about it's about focus. So the biggest thing you can do to improve focus is to turn down the noise and the distractions.
turning down the noise and the distractions. Focus.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sounds all right. One more question. Do I need more people or better systems? I could take a stab at that one, but let's let the expert answer that one.
Well, it depends. What's your goal?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that is a super context specific question. Uh, that one, I would say, yeah, I couldn't say a I would, if I was forced to say, just based on the question in isolation, I'd say both.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
probably better systems first because you
First.
don't want to scale and add more people to a bad system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Makes total sense. Robin, it's been such a
Mhm.
pleasure interviewing you and getting a chance to learn more, pick that brilliant mind of yours and get a little bit more understanding. Thanks so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. And thank you to the audience and those who are part of it. If you want to, we definitely ask you to scan the QR code so you can get an exclusive webinar gift. If you would love to learn more about how you can contact us at Harper Consultants as well too, in terms of bringing in the right people, the right tools, the right talent, the right systems, whether they be technology based or contacting individuals such as Robin who are experts in their various fields. By all means, reach out to us. But thank you so much, everyone. We're glad that you could join us today and hope to see you again next time. Thank you.
Great. Cheers.
Cheers.